Good evening. My name is Minister Johnny Banks Sr. I'm the Executive Director of Anak at Midnight. Anak at Midnight is located at 400 West 76th Street and Suite 206. We can be reached at Anak at Midnight at 773-488-2960. It's really great to be back. Our callers, I want you to get close to your phone, just jump right in this evening as we have some lively discussion around one of the topics that I hold dear to heart. That's human and community development. As we look around our world, as we look around closely in our own city, things seem to be becoming more and more increasingly violent. Just this weekend in our city alone, there were 43 shootings of varying forms with varying outcomes. Among those, around 10 or so deaths. And we as a people, we're going to have to slow down for a minute, take a look at where we at, take a look at what we're doing, and start questioning what is the emanating cause or the imminent cause of this violence. Where does it keep coming from? We can make excuses about guns. We can make excuses about gangs. All of those things are factors. But what is the overarching reality of why we are having so much trouble with violence, and we seem not to be able to eradicate it from this land or any other land? What is our struggle? What must we do? And so we want to hear from the callers. If you're watching the show tonight, call in and let us know what your opinion, what you believe, what you think, what you feel may or may not be the causes of violence, how we can do something about it. Our phone lines will be open all evening, and we want people to really chime in, because we really need to know what the people think, what the people feel, what is the lifeblood, what is going on that keeps this violence just continually to go on and on and on. We have a caller. We'll take this caller right now. Caller, are you there?
Yes. How are you?
Good evening, sir.
Yes, this is Brother Harry McGraw. I was calling because I thought that your question that you posed to our city was a very valid one.
Okay.
I also feel that there is a violence kind of spirit that's going on in our community.
Okay.
Not so much our community, but I think the city at large. Now, I did notice that a couple of weekends ago when the GA Summit was going on here in Chicago, and there was a heavy police presence, there was state troopers, there was Secret Service, there was SWAT, there was every kind of police there was on the street in certain areas. A lot of crime that was being perpetrated in the outskirts of the city was not being reported.
Okay.
So I really feel that there was a kind of manipulation that's going on with the media, and it's kind of skewed a little bit to target a certain demographic, to make it seem more violent than some other communities. But at the end of the day, I think that the numbers speak for themselves, and some of the violence can be curbed by heavy police presence. And if the powers that be really wanted to put a dent in this, they could. But I think it generates money in our penal system. I think it generates money with tickets, costs, and all those kind of things. So I think those variables add to the overall systemic problem. You touched on gangs. You said something about gangs. You said something about guns, and drugs. Yes, those are also variables as well. But I think there's a bigger engine.
Absolutely.
This train.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate you bringing this to the forefront, my brother. You have a great show.
Thank you so much. Let's take another call. Caller, good evening.
Good evening, sir. Here's the situation. When Chicago went through a period like this before, it was during Prohibition.
Okay.
When alcohol was illegal, that's when the drive-by shooting was actually created by the Al Capone, the gangsters. The Italians actually created the drive-by shooting phenomena.
Okay.
But the real situation is this: 2 points. Number one, the Chicago Police Department released statistics saying there are 600 gangs in the city. 70% of the shootings are gang-related. So obviously, the selling and the manufacturing of drugs is what's creating the violence. But the one point that I want to end with is that out of the 50 states in the United States of America, Illinois is the only state that doesn't have a concealed carry law in some shape, form, or fashion. So until some more prominent citizens will be hit or wounded by this gunfire, we won't be able really even to protect ourselves. So those are some facts I'm going to put on the table. It's gangs, it's drugs, it's profit, it's money, and if we legalize drugs, it all go away.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Before we take another call, I want to respond a little bit to what both callers said, and especially this last caller. He brought in the depression, and the depression brought its own variables in terms of violence and the things that are created by that kind of irresponsible behavior. As we fast forward into today, violence is still occurring due to a lot of irresponsible behavior. But let's go a little deeper. Let's go into the root causes of violence. Some of the principles or some of the things that we can start looking at and say, okay, what is the underlying causes of some of this violence? I want the viewing audience to look at it in a few different ways. As violence being the worst, as poverty being the worst form of violence. And if we looked at some of this audience, we could see that we're talking about wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, and politics without principle. If any one of us or all of us were to take these 7 realities and really study them and work them through to their logical conclusion, we could see that the underlying reality of poverty and the depression, poverty drove men to become animals. In the financial downturn of the day, poverty and in its abject state is causing people to resort to animalistic, barbarian type behavior to try to gain for themselves that which man should be able to create and develop without violating himself or violating other people. We're going to really have to start somewhere and build a platform so we can start to look at it. And what I believe is that people cannot live, whether they're living in other countries or whether they're here in America, whether they're in this city or another city, when food, clothing, and shelter is given by God to all, even the bird in its simplest form is given by nature and given by God, food, clothing, and shelter. And when we have this much riches and we have this much wealth in one place, and we have as much poverty scattered among the people, then the people will rebel. The people will fall into wrong. The people will go into folly and behavior that's not fit for humanity, to simply try and be what they think they need to be and have the things that they need to have for themselves. Poverty is almost like heroin being the elixir to the addict. Poverty is like a heroin to the people who are suffering and struggling, trying to live a simple life. As we talk about levels of poverty and those that's living below the poverty line, those that living at the poverty line, and those who come nowhere near it. America and what it stands for. And we hear many times how we hold this truth to be self-evident, that all of us are created equal, but we're not living equal, and we're surviving less than animals. We cannot continue to live like this. So we're gonna continue to deal with this issue, because until we see that guns is a direct result of people living in poverty, we see that the use and abuse of drugs is direct result of people living in poverty. When we see that the violence that comes from it is a direct result of being in an environment that is blanketed with poverty, until we can make a dent into poverty, till we can create jobs and bring jobs into the community, till we can revitalize the homes with services and with resources that they need, that people can regain their vitality and their dignity, then poverty will always look like it's winning. And poverty cannot win in a country which is almost one of the wealthiest ones in the world. So we're going to have to take a look at that, callers. We're going to have to continue to go back and forth on that, but we can't talk too long. We're going to have to move into action, and we're going to have to start looking at how we're going to move into action. Good evening. My name is Minister Johnny Banks Sr. I'm the Executive Director of A Knock at Midnight. We're talking a little bit about violence and the root causes of violence. We're encouraging the callers to call in often, and we're going to take your calls to hear what you have to say, what is your opinions, or what you believe about the issue of violence. Let's take another call. Yes, caller. Let's take another.
Yeah, Mr. Banks,
Yes, sir.
Junior, I actually agree with what you just said. You're absolutely correct. Poverty is probably the key indicator that's driving this behavior, but I would put on the table respectfully that we have to not necessarily put guns in the equation, because I grew up in an impoverished community that was a rural community in the country in another state. We drove around with gun racks in the back of our trucks, and we never used them against each other. But from a sociological perspective, all minorities all over the world locked out of mainstream opportunities engage in violence because they engage in behavior that will generate income outside of the mainstream in an illegal way. And so violence is one of the driving vehicles in those type of wealth-generating systems. But I definitely agree with you, and this is a very interesting show. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We got somebody else? Let's go a little further. Let's take this first point. Wealth without works. We see that there are really no shortcuts to success. You cannot shortcut your way into wealth. Wealth requires purpose. Wealth requires commitment. So working and trying to produce wealth from that which you're working on, working for, or working with has to have a purpose, a dogged determination, and a commitment to not only produce for yourself, but produce for others around you. And what we are coming to find out is that we're constantly in an environment where people are trying to get wealth and not put the work in, or not build a foundation by which their children and their children's children can reap the benefits from their own work. Hustles and scams and different things that people are involved in, whether it's the petty things that are happening in the community, or the large scale things that are happening on all different levels. We cannot dismiss any of it. We really do have to be able to put work in, and work, by definition, is love made visible. And when people are loving towards self and others, then the things that they do to produce wealth is what we'll see. Whether it's on the community level with green grass and the things that makes a community flourish, whether it's people and their care for themselves and their care for their health that makes them look like they should look and make them be the people that they should be. No matter how we look at it, poverty by its very nature is taking away a whole lot from a lot of people. You know, it's amazing how you can go in certain areas and you can do certain things and you can smell slums, but you also can see slaves. And we're not talking about the slave from the slave ship. We're talking people that's a slave to poverty. And what conscious American wants to see one of their brothers or sisters having to barter a link card just to give their children car fare? It ain't all about drugs. We want to make it the worst thing in the world, but some people are doing simplistic things, trying to do right when in an environment that does not uphold and protect the doing it right. So poverty is that environment. We have to take a look at it. We have another call. We're going to take another caller. Yes, call. Are you there?
Yes, Brother Banks. I just wanted to also add that during that NATO summit, I saw protesters. There were white protesters going in a white neighborhood like Bridgeport, and they were exercising their right to free speech in a way that broke out some violence. And in that process, I did notice that people were not treated the same way. Now, if young African Americans were trying to exercise their freedom of speech rights in that same manner, I really and truly believe that the police would not have reacted in the same way.
Well, that's possible, and that might be true. But we do know anywhere there's premeditated violence, and a lot of the stuff that we saw was premeditated. The police were well aware of what was going to happen, what could happen, what was about to happen. There was no intent of having nonviolent civil disobedience. There was no intent of marching and protesting peacefully. Most of the people were intent on being rabble rousers. Most of them was intent on causing trouble or creating the climate for something to go wrong. And so when you start talking about people who are premeditatingly trying to cause a situation to occur that they hopefully can show somebody that that somebody's doing something wrong or violating their rights, then inevitably what you see is just the opposite, where people come in and uphold the rights of the citizenry to stop people from taking advantage of the residents of the city of Chicago, because most of those protesters were not from the city of Chicago. They were from other places, paid professional agitators, paid professional rabble rousers. That didn't take any rocket scientists to see through that sham and that charade. And I think that the city of Chicago and the people that try to uphold and protect whatever they're doing, they did a very, very good job. And I take my hat off to them for that. But we also know if you check the murder rate and the shootings for that same weekend, they were down. So it's something to take a look at. You know, we throw out a lot of stats and all that kind of stuff, but some things we just simply have to say, okay, allow us to start looking at this stuff from a different way. Because one of the quotes of Mahatma Gandhi is simply saying that poverty is the worst form of violence. So if we just take out all the other forms and go and deal with the worst form of violence, if we go deal with the worst first, then it has to get greater later. It has to. So I'm one of those people. Let me go deal with what's worse first. Something that I can impact and change on my little level on the ground from a grassroots perspective, which is helping people develop the skills, helping people get the will they need to be what God created them to be, to understand finance, to understand resources, to understand home, to understand community, to bring understanding. Because I truly believe where there is a lack of vision, the people so shall perish. And so we're finding out that people cannot see through the blanket of poverty. They cannot see through the darkness that permeates all through the neighborhood, all through the community, as people are trying to create something for themselves and something for their families. Let's go to the next one. Pleasure without conscience. Man cannot continue to not think through their own existence on this earth. To continually seek pleasure without thinking it through. Going to places like a riverboat, which I think is unlawful, even though it's been made law that is legal. It is unlawful to hoard ignorant people onto a boat and extract their resources in games of chance that they have no chance of winning. Everybody knows that this is wrong, but sin tax cannot take care of a people. The same sin that we taxing is the same sin that's creating the violence. How can that be? On the one hand, we're gonna tax the sin. On the other hand, we're now going to tax the sinner. That is absolutely insane. That's insane. That's insanity at its highest level. And so we see that people are pursuing pleasure, but what it's costing them is their freedom. And man cannot continue to unconsciously seek pleasure, whether it's through drugs and alcohol, whether it's through gambling, whether it's through, as we saw a few years back with everybody consistently refinancing of homes, everybody buying homes with what they call no docs. All this stuff happened. And the one thing that the African American community had was home ownership, and it no longer exists. We're back to being renters when we were owners. And some families, those homes were generational. And those homes have now been extracted from the hands that created them, the hands that molded them, and now they've been put in other places or just simply abandoned simply because we were unconsciously doing things, seeking pleasure, seeking stuff, seeking better clothes, seeking a better car, seeking better comforts of life without conscience of life. And we're going to pay dearly for that for the next generation to come. Let's take another caller. Caller, could you please be brief with your comment and question?
Yes, I'll be very brief. First of all, thank you very much for taking your time and effort to
You're welcome, sir.
spread the good word about what needs to be said. One of the things that I think that people need to take a look at is an understanding of what rights are versus what privileges are.
That's right.
Because we have a lot of constitutional issues that people don't understand in terms of right to bear arms, protect yourself, a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness,
Mm-hmm.
and how that's often suppressed by the political beings that try to control us. And I wanted you to kind of speak on that because I think that people don't understand we have a right to travel.
That's right.
The driver's license issue is a big issue. People don't even understand that is really capitulating to a slave state. They don't understand that the taxes that we pay, people don't even understand the taxes that we pay don't really even go for the services. They don't even understand that that's going to the Vatican. I don't want to get too far out there on you,
Okay.
but people really need to understand what's what. We're getting to the point where we have to stop being ignorant